Probably in a lot of seminaries around here, Piedmont for a season, as well as Bob Jones. I teach in their doctoral program, Master's Seminary in California, Faith. There's a lot of them just have me in for teaching a class or two here or there. So I've taught a lot of biblical counseling, and now, as of January, I am the executive director of the Biblical Counseling Coalition, and that has just been a delightful. It's really just another hat to wear. It's like y'all, when you're in mission work, you do a lot of things. And so in biblical counseling work, we do a lot of things. And that's part of the season God has me in. And I'm enjoying that. So today, we're going to be talking about like first response training or spiritual triage. As you know, sometimes in a hallway, someone comes up to you and they say something. And there's a paper over there if you want to grab it. You missed it, I think, and I don't want you to. You're going to be looking for it. Maybe it's in a hallway. Maybe it's in a crisis moment. So they call you on the phone, or they text you, or they get in contact. Maybe they call the office. It could be a moment of chaos. It could be, as Richard and I have been talking off and on, it might be just standing in a thrift store. When somebody drops information, and now you're sitting there thinking, so what do I do? How do I respond? What should I say? Where should we go? Right? Do you just say, well, God bless you, and let them walk on? Or is there something you can do in that moment that's not going to take hours or weeks, but in the moment of actually doing ministry, you can do something to help them? And that's kind of what we're looking to talk about this hour. What can you talk about? What can you do in terms of spiritual triage? Right? Sometimes people come in and they're panicked. Or maybe even they're talking suicidal ideation stuff. Or, as happens a lot, they can be intoxicated. I've put more than one guy to bed over the years who's had too much to drink and trying to help them. Maybe it's psychosis-like behavior, and you don't really know what's going on. It's just absolutely scary. What you hear. Could be grief. Just found out a parent died, a sibling died, maybe even a child. Or domestic conflict, or despair, right? That's a long list of the things that you deal with every day. Trauma reactions, or an angry resident with another resident, or manipulation, right? That happens a time or two. So, right, in all of those things, you say, so what am I supposed to do next? Where can I go? How do I think? Right? What am I supposed to do to help this particular individual? So as I was thinking about our time together, in my mind, it's at that point, you don't need to know everything, what to do, but you at least need to know stuff like, so what are our big categories? Right? What should be my instinct right now? Right? If I'm seeing what's going on now, how should I respond to it? Or what's my priority? Or what's my confidence? And so we've just got three big things to work through. Plenty of time to do it between now and 10:45. That's excellent. And we want to talk through these three big ideas. As we do, let me pray and just ask God to give us wisdom as we think through it. Lord, what a joy to be with these front line, not simply brothers and sisters, but frontline individuals, first responders that you have on the scene in all of these different cities, where people come in and they have real hurt and real heartache and real problems. Many of them have physical needs, or all of them with spiritual needs. And you've put these people there to talk with them and help them. And Lord, we thank you for that. That these individuals have answered that call, that they are willing, that they give of themselves, they sacrifice in so many different ways. Lord, I pray that our time together would bring you honor first and foremost, but also would give them some new tools maybe to be able to think through how to respond to that person that might be despondent or might be in a sense of panic. They might be in despair. So Lord, I pray that you would help us think through how we can help them. for your glory is what we're praying that it'll all be for. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so number one, the goal is you need to think, I'm not trying to fix this. What I want to be in this moment is a faithful presence. I love 2 Corinthians 5, when he says that we are ambassadors of Christ. Like that's what God's goal is in any moment, is to be able to speak and think and respond as Christ. Let me give you one other text that I love when we think about this. It's 1 Peter chapter 4 when he says, as each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. So we receive this grace from the Lord, and our responsibility then is to be careful in how we give it out. And then he gives us the two categories. He says, if you speak, let him speak as the oracles of God. Now, I had not thought about the significance of the word Peter chooses when he says, as the oracles of God. I'd never considered that until not too long ago. My wife and I spent a couple weeks. It was a long planned trip, and we added some missionaries in the middle of the trip. But we spent a couple weeks over in Greece and Italy and Greece. And in that trip, we went to this particular temple. I think it was a temple for Zeus, where we read about this person who gave oracles. Now, this priestess would sit on this in Zeus's temple, and they found out, of course, years and years later, that there was various gases that leak through that. And so basically she was on a constant high. Mm-hmm. So she would go and sit on this throne, and she would be high, and it was, as you can imagine, a big scam. Right? So people would come to town. You'd bring all kinds of offerings. You would come to town. You would present yourself at the temple, and they would say, well, let's see if they have anything to say to you today. You'll leave your offering. They go check and say, nope, come back tomorrow. Bring another offering, but come back tomorrow, and then we'll see if there's any oracle of God for you from Zeus. And that would happen maybe a couple of times. Well, between the moment they were presenting one day and the next day, they would go eat. They would sit, right, what we would call just a bar or wherever. They would sit and talk with people. Well, the townspeople were all in on it. Right? So they chatted up with you. Oh, where are you from? What are you here for? What are you looking for an oracle about? And they would get the information, and of course then they would go funnel that information to the temple so that when Zeus did speak, he would speak something related to what your issue was, right? Because they've chatted you up along the way. And the oracle, the woman actually typically, it was always women, and they would be there for a particular time, then they'd switch it out with a different priestess. She never actually said anything. It was more just she was in a constant state of being high. And so she would make noises. Then the people that were the helpers would take the information from the townspeople. They would say, we went and got an oracle from God. They would give some kind of advice that was fuzzy at best, so that if it worked out well, they win. If it didn't work out well, then it would be one of those things, well, I must have misunderstood. All a scam. But the point is, everybody came and they brought a lot of money, what? For the oracle. Because they wanted to hear from God. What does Peter say? Peter says, if you speak, or we could say when you speak as if you're speaking the oracles of God. Now, we don't have a sense of I have God's authority, but I feel the sense, the pressure of I am an ambassador of Jesus Christ. Right? So when I speak, I want to speak in a way that honors Christ. I want to speak in a way that's true to His Word. I want to speak in a way that's helpful. And so when we think of a faithful presence, we have to think, my goal isn't to solve everything. Now, there might be danger. I want to certainly protect them. They might be an incredible, stable moment. I want to maybe give some kind of stability and hope and maybe some faithful next steps. But the big idea is just I want to be present. I want to represent Christ. I want to be faithful, right? A voice of discernment. If it's, again, maybe a voice of stabilization if things seem a bit shaky. But the goal is faithfulness to Christ on my part, more than a fixer. Because it's easy, isn't it, when people are coming to us to think, oh, I've got to fix this, right? What do I need to do to fix it? I think in the Bible actually never teaches us to be fixers. The Bible says we're ambassadors. We speak. We have a presence. I remember when I first went into ministry, this was in like 1994, 95. I worked for a lot of people my age, right? I was in my early 20s. A lot of guys would go into youth ministry. I went the opposite extreme and went into senior adult ministry. And my wife and I absolutely loved that, did it 6 years full time. But I worked for a senior pastor. We were in a great big church that could afford just one guy on staff that dealt with one age group, senior adults. And so, as you can imagine, if you're a senior adult pastor, you're in the hospital a lot. Right? We had about 200 or so senior adults. And so I would be in the hospitals a lot. Well, sometimes I would go, and I always enjoyed the family, tried to do everything I needed to do. But when I would go with the senior pastor who had started this church, had been there 40 years, he was in his late 70s at that point. When I would go with him, the longer we were in a room, it was fascinating. You could see, I've stood there quietly watching my senior pastor talk to a family, and you can see blood pressures change. You can see pulse rates go down, not because he has any, not because there's something spiritually, right? Not metaphysically he's doing, but it was his calming presence, right? The man that's loved us and cared for us and taken care of us and walks with the Lord, he's here. And they would just begin to relax. And I thought in my mind, isn't that really what we do anyway? Isn't that our goal? We walk into anywhere, and we really are supposed to just represent Christ. And we're the one that's supposed to have discernment and wisdom. And so a faithful presence is what we're thinking about. That's the goal. So kind of gets us off the hook a bit. And then I would say in that 1 Peter 4, not just the oracles of God, but it says, and if you do it with the ministry. If you minister, do it with the energy that God provides. So the goal is from fixing to faithful presence. Let's look at number 2. What are some triage questions? And when we think of triage, we're thinking about data gathering, right? What do I need to know from this individual that will help me understand and help them in terms of their situation? I think there are 4 key questions that you can ask. And as you ask those questions, they're going to give you the capacity to understand, to discern. Now, of course, you will never know anything, right? I think probably we should say that just so that you know. The very best counselor that ever has lived, whoever that person is, they would never have gotten Job's situation right. Right? No matter how many questions they asked, no matter how many sessions they had, they would have never known what was going on between Satan and God. And so impossible to know everything. Right? There's a dimension we have no idea about except what the Bible teaches. But the reality is we can't even begin to think we're going to get it always right. Right? You don't know what the Lord knows. Only Jesus had the capacity to walk in and say to a lady sitting on or getting water, yeah, you don't just you've not had one husband, but you've had 5, right? That's only one person has that kind of understanding, and we're not that person, right? He still lives, but not around here. So what's going on is the first question, right? That's the question we're going to look at. And in that question, we're looking for situation. Right? What are the circumstances? The word I like to use are what are the pressures in this person's life? Remember in James chapter 1 when it says, count it pure joy. This is James 1:2. Count it pure joy when you fall into the word is trials.
Yeah.
That's the way the English word is. The word behind that is the word parosmos, and it means pressure-filled circumstances. And the word various, it's kind of like a kaleidoscope. You know, if you turn a kaleidoscope and you're looking at it, it has all these various shapes, and they keep changing. And so the more you turn it, the more they move, and it's actually pretty cool to see. That's what the word various is. So when we go through all these different types and shades of pressures, he says, count it pure joy when you go through those. Why? Because God, in verse 3, he says, God is using those as you undergo them in order to give you pieces that you're missing in your character. Right? It gives you things that God is trying to work on in your life. God is providing those in that circumstance. He says, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience, but let it have its finished work so that you'll be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. In other words, you'll have your pieces together. It's one of the most frustrating things is if you buy something and you get it home, and of course you have to put it all together, and you start putting it together, and you realize there are pieces missing. Right? I just bought this; it's brand new, but yet there's not a piece. I remember back in the day, we bought our first house, so we're going years and years ago. Well, my son, who's now 25 and married, he was about 1, so we're talking 25 years ago. We pulled into a Walmart. Kelly needed to go inside and grab some stuff. It was in the winter time. And so as we pulled up, it was dark, but I could see that they had put like all of these grills out on the sidewalk, and they all had that starburst on them, so you know it was a sale. So I, as any good husband would do, I dropped her off and drove around the parking lot and pulled up on the sidewalk because my 1-year-old was in the car. And I was looking at all these grills, and then of course when one man starts, all the men, you know how that goes. So all the guys start showing up. So I just took the biggest one and just pulled the thing off and said, "This is it." I didn't really inspect it. Every grill out there was $50. I mean, it was a fantastic buy. Well, I get it home. We just bought our first home. Was beginning to plant the church, right? So it was a pretty big deal. We have this deck. First pretty day, I'm thinking, we gotta fire up that grill, right? So call my wife, hey, bring some meat, right? We've got to get this grill going. I go out there, and no matter what I do, I couldn't get it started. Now this was, remember how many years ago it was, and I thought, well, maybe they have a website, right? So that's how long ago it was. So I look it up, go online, dial up, find out, yes, they have a website. Here's their number, because I didn't get any paperwork, because it was basically the floor models. So I call them. This sweet lady from the South, she said, well, honey, do you have a cordless phone? I did, right? So we were one step toward getting solutions. She said, go outside and just tell me everything you see. And so I started on the outside and explained everything I could see, opened it up, explained everything I could see. She said, all right, we'll send you what you're missing. 2 days later, they sent, it was a 2-day package, which I was surprised about, but they sent me 2 boxes. The second one was so heavy, I wasn't anticipating the weight, and I could hardly pick it up. That grill was missing all kinds of pieces. I mean, I had a shell of a grill for $50, and I had no idea what was missing because I didn't know what was supposed to go inside of it. I had no idea what was supposed to go inside that grill. What happened then, when I talked to the manufacturer, they knew. They sent me all the pieces, put it together, and now that 25-year-old son, that's the grill he uses that now at his house with his new wife in their house. Here's my point. God brings pressures so that we can develop pieces that he knows we're missing. We don't know what's missing, right? We know that we're not like Christ, of course, but God is giving us these pressures. So when we ask the question, what is going on? We ask that question with the realization that there is a providential God working through pressures to bring about the character change that he desires in this particular individual. I think one of the good biblical metaphors for it is the idea of heat. Right, remember in Psalm 1, it says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, or stands in the way of sinners, or sits in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night." What? "And he shall be like the tree planted by the rivers of water, that brings forth its fruit in its season, and its leaf will not wither." Right? So the idea is whenever the sun is hot, same thing in Jeremiah, same word picture. Whenever the sun is hot, what? That heat is on a plant and it withers leaves, it hurts the fruit, right? It depends. But when it's planted in the right place, it produces fruit. It produces exactly what it should produce. That's the idea when we say what is going on. We're saying, what is the heat in this person's life? Because what the Bible talks about the heart, it says Jesus says it several times in the gospel. It says, "For from within comes all of these things." And he says that from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So the mouth is the fruit, the heart is the root. Right? So if you think of the situation as heat, that heat is placed on the roots. It's placed on the heart of an individual. And then what you experience and what I experience from that would be the fruit, or what's going on at least at the speaking and the doing level. And so we think of heat. So first question is, what is going on? So you can kind of categorize it maybe in three ways, but at least in two ways. One, of course, is historical. Right? Because if you ask somebody, "Hey, well, tell me what's going on. I see that you're upset. Tell me a little bit about what's happening." When you ask that question, you're going to get a mix of what? All kinds of stuff, right? Usually just a bucket, and they just dump it out, and it's spreading everywhere. And so you're going to get a little bit of history, and you're going to get a little bit of present. And sometimes it takes a little discernment to figure out, okay, are you talking about now? No, that was 10 years ago, but it sounds like it happened yesterday. Well, that's historical past, but that's still going on. Right? It's still in this moment of them responding. And then sometimes you get present. And then you're going to also hear a concern for the future. Well, all of that is part of their situation. Right? So it could be in any of our situations, but it could be homelessness. It could be loss of job, loss of relationships. It could be grief, some kind of PTS, some kind of traumatic thing that's happened in the past that you're hearing about now. And for all you know, it happened 20 years ago. But today, right now, in this moment, it's still the circumstance that you're dealing with. That's the heat. That's the circumstance God has providentially allowed so that he can get what he wants to do. Now, I'm going to go back to James just for 1 second. Because we say, well, why is that important? It's important because in James 1, he says, but let it have its finished work. Then you'll be complete and entire with all your pieces, wanting nothing. Finished work. Let's think briefly. And I am not a baker, but let's just think about a cake. Right? When you have a pan and you put all the ingredients, you mix them up and then you pour it in the pan,